Hi there, everyone. I'm Ani Anderson, and this is my partner, Brian Traskos. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Ani, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you today?
Doing great.
Good,
We have the
good.
same Shoji screen, I see.
Oh, we do. Yeah, we
Oh,
have matching
yeah.
backgrounds. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our live stream today. We're talking about clients not showing up. So you might be watching us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or on YouTube. Wherever you're watching us, we encourage you to please give us a like or subscribe and join
Mhm.
us on our different channels. We've been doing these live streams. We're going to be doing more for you, and we want to make sure that you find out about the information that we're streaming at the Somatic Coaching Academy. So welcome today.
Yes, welcome, welcome.
So, Brian, as we're talking about the concept of showing up, I just want to start like base level here on this conversation for a second, because we hear this all the time. We hear
Hmm.
coaches and therapists and experts talking about their clients potentially not showing up, right? And it
Yep.
can create quite a bit of frustration. And so, one of the things that I want to start the conversation with is curiosity around if you've defined what that looks like. I remember for us, we've had some issues in our programs, not so much for us to say our clients aren't showing up, but for other participants to say, this person's not showing up, that person's not
Right.
showing
Yeah.
up. So right. It's been interesting from a client level. And we needed to get to the point where in our programs, we defined what that means, what it looks like, right? So creating some of those structures though actually is really important from a standpoint of being trauma informed.
Yep.
Right? So you want to talk about that for a sec?
Sure. And I do love where you're going with this, Ani, because it is about how really it is oftentimes about how you're showing up. Because there's different gradations to that, right? I mean, some people can be scheduled for something and just not attend, right? Just not be there, and so not show up. And also, we could be attending physically be attending, but not be we're not on all bars, right? All 5 bars of our cell signal aren't operating. So physically we're there, but emotionally maybe we're not showing up, or intellectually not showing up, or energetically we're not showing up, or something like that. So there's different gradations to this. And so it gets kind of subtle, right? It's not a binary thing, like either you're showing up or you're not showing up. There's subtle gradations to this. And when we talk about resistance, I think when people experience resistance, in many ways it does show up, or it is kind of like micro trauma responses. So, we can talk about, oh, hey, Noah's here. Awesome. Hey, Noah's here. Cool, man. Good to have you here. So, lots of times when we think about trauma, we think about these big responses that people might have, but we oftentimes see those smaller micro trauma responses, and that's what we talk about as resistance. So when we think about being trauma informed, that's the first, right? That's hopefully right there. That's information. It's like, wow, I didn't realize that when someone gets fighty, kind of, or intellectually resistant or judgmental, that's a trauma response. Well, yeah, it's a micro trauma response. Or when someone all of a sudden starts fiddling around, and you're fiddling with something, be like, okay, I gotta go. I got something to do. Okay, I'll talk to you later. I gotta do this, and they're checking other things. They're checking their email. That's actually a micro trauma response.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about this because I think it's so important for us to be trauma informed, trauma aware when we are people helpers, right? And so, one of the things that we've noticed can happen in programs is people start nitpicking about even tiny things. Like I remember one time we were leading a group, and one of the participants was eating, and another person was taking that as that person wasn't showing up because they were eating on a call. And so we've got all of, especially in a group, all of these people's perceptions. And then it gets complicated, right? But to recognize that trauma can show up, and people's trauma doesn't have to be like this massive red flag, this big, huge thing. It can show up in these really nuanced ways. And so when we recognize that a person not showing up could have something to do with trauma,
Mhm.
all of a sudden, I think it changes our perspective about how we might approach it.
100%, Ani, because let's think about trauma is kind of actually on a continuum, if you will, and all humans experience stress. Like, so that's actually stress is necessary for us to survive as humans. Humans, even in this day and age, who do not have a stress response, don't live very long. And because there's all kinds of things we have to adapt to in the world. And so stress is adaptive. So 100% of humans experience stress, and that's a good thing. Now, about 90% of humans, and these numbers were pre-pandemic, by the way, so who knows now, but 90% of humans experience what we call traumatic stress. So this is a stress where it takes it up a notch, where it's not about being adaptive to what we're doing, that there's actually a either subconsciously or consciously a threat to life in some way. So there's some type of perceived threat to life. And we don't get to determine for someone else whether or not they have a perceived threat to life or not.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
if I have a perceived threat to my life, like no one else has a right to judge whether I perceive that as threatening. But the way we can tell that that actually occurred is because something changes in the physiology that now has tripped stress to traumatic stress.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. And Noah in the Facebook chat just put like a great, that just what you're talking about perception. Another person's interpretation could be that the person wanted to show up so badly that they're willing to compromise their meal time. Like they brought their meal instead of not showing up. So that's totally true. And we don't have a right to judge somebody else's like what they perceive as,
Right.
as threat. So that's really super interesting. So so these trauma responses can show up in different ways, and I think that that's interesting, and it's also not terribly in our scope for what we're gonna go deeply into today. But let's just talk really quick, Brian, about the main ways that those trauma responses show up.
The 4 primary trauma responses.
Yeah.
So so these are common for most people, right? These are pretty common in vernacular. Most people understand these. But the 4 basic types of trauma responses are fight, flight, freeze, and fawning. And so fawning also they talk about as being appease, like freeze and appease, or freezing and fawning. So fawning and appeasing are kind of the same thing. So fighting shows up. Well, it could actually be physically fighting your way out of a threatening situation, right? Or more micro to that, we go into a place where we are judging someone else. And so that's actually a trauma response. It's a stress response. We go into a judgmental part of our awareness or our psyche or our operating, and we are not open to new ways of thinking because we are judging. Typically is like either someone else is wrong or you're wrong. Those are both kind of fighting responses.
Right. Yeah. We could be pointing the finger or actually pointing it at ourselves.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So flight is the next one. So flight could look like, okay, so there's a threatening situation. I turn around and run from it, like I'm running from a dog, from a rabid dog or something like that, or from a bear or something. And by the way, I'm not a bear expert, so I don't know whether you should run from bears or not. So don't take that. That's not professional advice. It's just an example. Okay, it's just an example. Okay, so do your bear homework if you're going into bear country.
I'm not sure that that's what you're supposed to do. But anyway, why don't we talk about the micro on that? Because that's more what we know what to do about.
Yeah, exactly. So the micro flight response is going to kind of look like, oh, hey, wait, I gotta check my phone. Hang on a second. Let me check that right now. Okay, gotta check that. Oh, wait, somebody's at the door. I'm just gonna turn off my camera. I'll be right back for a second. Oh no, I can't do that. I've got to do. So we're flighting or we're running away from attending to the thing that is in front of us.
Right. And then freeze actually is I think my favorite because I just find it so fascinating. And I think when we talk about this, the people that we're talking to are like, really? That freeze response can show up as confusion. I don't know what to do. What were the instructions? Did you catch what they said? Like, it's really wild to see how that happens from from a micro standpoint.
Right. Yeah. Or you're having a conversation and they're like, I just don't understand what you mean. What are you talking about? I don't get that. I don't get that. Something doesn't feel right to me. Something, I'm not sure. Like those kind of things. Yes. Those are all micro freeze responses where someone's cognitive capacities are going into really massive shutdown. So it's not like we're trying to get away from it or fight it. we're actually shutting down internally, which creates confusion or a decreased capacity to cognitively attend to something.
Right. So let's talk about that last one, fawning, and then we'll just wrap up with some suggestions.
Yeah. So fawning is really people pleasing. So in these cases, again, a big response would be falling down on your knees and submitting or praying to forgiveness for somebody who puts you in a life-threatening situation. So it's completely backwards in that regard. So micro-wise, though, it's when you've had an interaction and you're immediately worried that the other person will get upset about it. And then you're immediately worried that what you just did is going to create more problems for you in your world or in your future. So we try to make up for it. We try to soften it up. And it might actually be no problem at all out there. But we then go overboard in terms of people pleasing or checking in, wanting to make sure it's okay with the other person, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think from a client perspective, we can see fawning when our client is uber concerned about like us or the other participants around. Like, was that okay? Did I do it right? Like, should we be doing it? Like, whoa, why are you so concerned about what everybody else is doing or about what we think of you or whatever? So just from a practical standpoint, so we can wrap up this quick live stream for today, we always want to leave you with practical advice. I got to be honest with you. I think if you've watched this now and you're listening, you're going to approach this in a totally different way.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Certainly,
all
yep.
of this, the awareness of the information that this is coming from a whole different place already, we don't even have to tell you what to do. You're going to have a totally different response than you would have, 10 minutes ago. So let's just then from a practical standpoint though, Brian, if somebody is having a micro trauma response and we notice that they are in fight, flight, freeze, or fawning, just from a global perspective, what is one thing that a person could do, an expert, a coach, a therapist, a consultant do in that instance that you think would be helpful?
Yeah, so when we look at this from a trauma-informed framework, the very first thing we want to do is ask the person what they need to do to feel safe, or what we need to do to help them feel safe, or what they need to happen in the environment to help them feel safe. So safety is the very first step in the trauma-informed framework. And if a human being isn't feeling safe, and by definition, if we're having even a micro trauma response, then we don't where we're
The last time I was on a live stream with you, you had a fire alarm.
I did have a phone call. Look at that. So that's really the first thing. How can we help someone else feel safe? And we can even ask them that, what do you need right now to help you feel safe?
Yeah, that's brilliant. And we can even do it from a standpoint of like take a time, like when you recognize somebody else is having a trauma response, just say, hey, let's just back up a second here. Like, what would be something we could do to make right now feel really good for you? Like that would be a really super friendly way of saying what Brian said in an everyday context that doesn't have to be weird at all. And I just want to point out too, that if somebody else is exhibiting fight about somebody else's not showing upness, then that would be a conversation that you would have with that person who's in fight, not necessarily the person who's eating their meal who happens to be pissing that person off. The person that they are perceiving isn't showing up. You actually would say the thing to the person who's actually exhibiting the stress response. As a facilitator, a group person who does groups or workshops, it can be challenging at times to manage those dynamics, right? When people are having all of their different dynamics, but you've got to make sure you're looking at the person who's actually having the stress response and not the person who's, having somebody else's finger pointed at them. Yeah. So awesome. So that's really super helpful. No, I'm super glad that you decided to join us. We encourage you, if you're watching this, to please put comments. Does this resonate with you? Have you had things like this come up? And we love any emoji, especially the one where the brain is being blown up. So
Exactly.
Noah. All right, folks, I'm glad you joined us for our live stream today, whether you're here live or watching the recording. We encourage you to please like the page or share this information because we think this is really important information for everybody to know, especially nowadays. So thanks so much for being here and sharing this information up, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks,
Bye, everybody.
everyone. Bye-bye.